Today on Locked On Canadiens, we finally know where the Habs will pick. So, who will they take at 5th overall?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1064. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We have to talk about Monopoly Go because this fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis to taunt your friends with. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or the App Store. My name is Laura Zab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined actually, I'm alone. I'm not joined by the wonderful Scott Matlove, Habs Eyes on the Prize. Scott is actually on vacation this week, but he wanted me to let you all know, in all caps, Scott wants Lindstrom or Demidov. So this is Scott's instant reaction. Obviously, we are going to talk about the lottery draft today. This is the Tuesday episode. We are a little bit late, but I wanted to record it after I had learned the results of the lottery draft because I wanted to have a very, not raw, but instant reaction. It's actually like an hour or so later that I'm recording this. And I really just wanted to capture, like the instinctual feelings that I got, as well as apparently Scott got, from the news that the Montreal Canadiens will be drafting 5th overall in the upcoming NHL Entry Draft. So it's not necessarily a huge surprise. There was obviously fear of the Canadiens moving down, but the way that it shook out was the San Jose Sharks got the 1st overall pick for the first time in their franchise history. Like, this is truly a franchise altering moment for them, and we're very, very happy for our lovely friend JD over at Locked On Sharks. But most importantly, where are the Habs picking? They are picking at 5th overall again. So we're going to talk a little bit later about what this means in the overall scheme of the rebuild, but I want to really quickly capture a couple of things that Kent Hughes said in reaction to learning that the Habs obviously are drafting 5th. Obviously, he said that, they're happy to hold on to the 5th overall position. And again, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. They're confident that they'll be able to draft a very good player with the 5th overall pick. I mean, that's self-explanatory. He said when with respect to whether they'll trade the pick or not, we will talk about that in the second segment. But he said that, as always, he's open to all options. I believe he even said that when they had the 1st overall pick. He said they were open to listening, but their plan right now is to draft a player with that pick. He also says that the plan right now is to draft a forward with the 5th overall pick. Like, I think, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's 100% what's going to happen. That's just what they're discussing as a franchise right now. That's what their view is. And I do think that we should talk about, who could be available, who they might want to draft. And I'll get to that in a very, very short moment. But he did also mention that they didn't have to move down this time. And he said that, he's listening to calls, he's going to make calls. But aside from Macklin Celebrini, obviously, who is projected to go 1st overall, not just projected to go, like all the media announced or anointed him 1st overall, it was like, well, the San Jose Sharks earned the chance to draft Macklin Celebrini. And Kent Hughes said he separated himself from the pack, but then behind him are a group of guys that are all in their way, all would add a lot to the franchise. So now that we know where they're picking, now that we know the order of the lottery, what we are going to do is we are going to start inviting our prospect scout friends, because we have a lot of questions for them. This is something that they do all year. These are players whose games and game tape they watch every single year, night in and night out, whether it's games from Europe, whether it's NCAA games, whether it's OHL games. So we will ask them for their thoughts. But I think initially, like, one of the things is that I think it's really funny that Scott has been banging on the Demidov drum all year, for the most part, and now there is a definitive possibility that he might be available at fifth overall. So I think, from my perspective, like, the general consensus from people that know more than I do is that that would be a fantastic pick. And I don't disagree. And I think that, there's a lot of consternation, I guess, a lot of dread from not just our listeners, but a lot of people were worried, oh, you know what, they're just going to pick like a defenseman. That's, they're gonna do the same thing they did. They're gonna do a surefire NHLer, but not with a high ceiling. And I think that this is not necessarily what is best for the Montreal Canadiens, right? Like, I understand why they picked David Reinbacher at fifth overall. At the time, I didn't agree with it, but I'm coming around to understanding why. And a lot of you actually pointed out to us as well. So maybe they took their defenseman in that year because this is a year where everybody is going to be looking at defensemen and there's going to be more forwards available to them, and they want a franchise altering or game breaking or something. So, with Demidov, our good friend Sebastian High says that it's a potential franchise piece, right? The ceiling is very, very high. This is a winger that everybody can get excited about. This is somebody who has the potential to really give the Canadians a threatening offense, right? Like, that's that in my mind. But I don't think people should be sitting on Caden Lindstrom. That's another name that comes up a lot. Do we think he's going to be available? Do we think Demidov is going to be available? I don't think so. Like, I don't know. Like, because, like, to me, the way people talk about him is that he won't be available, right? Like, and I'm trying to find um I'm trying to find someone who disagrees with me. Um and it's weird because there are a lot of people that think that he'll be available because certain franchises like get attached to certain guys when they're scouting them, and then that's going to be their guy and there's no shaking them off of that. Like, I feel like if either Lindstrom or Demidov is available, that's who's going to go. Scott and I are also particularly partial to Berkeley Catton. Some scouts aren't as high on him as they are on the other two, which I understand. But, like, it's all kind of a moot point, right? If they're not available, there's a lot of talk about Tijigima, and we've even done a speculation episode about him as well. But it doesn't seem like he's done enough to get into that same conversation as the players I just mentioned in terms of like the top three. And obviously there's like a lot of opportunities to talk and see how things are going to go, and how um, you know there's going to be a lot of, like, with the Montreal Canadiens, a lot of times, like, when there's smoke there's fire. The last couple of drafts, journalists were able to accurately predict, by being tapped in with the right people, like, who the Canadians are going to take. So I think that if there's someone they're interested in, we're going to hear about it before long. My concern is always with these situations is the player that we want the Canadians to want. I'm going to put it as the way we want the Canadians to want, going to be available at fifth overall. Like, last year, it was. We all talked about Zach Benson. He was available. But then the Canadians didn't do what we expected them to do. Like, this time around, maybe it's going to be different. But as a lot of like listeners amongst you, but a lot of people we talked to have pointed out, like, it's possible it's just that the goalies and the defensemen take longer to develop. So that's why they loaded up on those this last draft. And then this upcoming draft is going to be a forward heavy draft for the Canadians, just because they want to make sure that those players all kind of reach the same potential at around the same time, right? So I think that's a pretty educated point of view on that. But it's also still speculation, right? Like, we don't know, like, that they haven't come right out and said that's what we're doing, right? So I think, like, from Kent Hughes, like, I didn't learn anything too surprising. And I think, he said that, right? Like, he said, like, the plan right now is to draft a forward. Which forward that is a lot largely dependent on who's left at that time. I am definitely, desperately hoping that Demidov is available, and I believe Scott, in his all caps, agrees with me. Coming up in just a moment, there also are some people that argue that they should trade the pick. So I do kind of want to talk about that a little bit and see. While it's not necessarily in the Canadiens' plans, as per Kent Hughes, he's still taking calls and he's still listening. He's still considering the possibility clearly. So let's talk about that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And I want to talk about Monopoly Go all the time because I know you already heard me talk about it, but there's just so much good stuff in this game that I really want to bring it up again. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments, and you can work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so many prizes that are available, like unique stickers that you can trade with your friends to complete albums for even bigger prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. I know like those playing pieces are always that bone of contention. Everybody has their favorite and everybody wants their own, and now you can get cool new ones by winning. Hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Like I personally, the thing with Monopoly Go is I'm a competitive person and I really like the taunting your friends aspect of it. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games, such as digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. All right, so we are reacting very shortly after we hear the news that the Canadiens are going to be picking fifth overall in the draft. We are going to talk a little bit later in this episode about what this means for their rebuild. Um, I guess it kind of also involves whether or not they should trade the pick. So, a lot of speculation about whether or not they would trade the pick, I think, is a lot of times unfounded because unless they know that the player that they want is going to be available a few spots down, I don't know necessarily that it is worth trading down for. Um, the reason is like I don't really think with the franchises that are ahead of them, I don't really think that they have something that those franchises would want. Um, Specifically because everybody in that list is in a rebuild. They're in some form of a rebuild, and a couple of the teams that are picking after them as well. So when you look at it that way, and you see like unless the Canadiens are willing to give up one of their top blue chip prospects, I don't think it's happening. Like none of those teams are really looking for a guy, right? So the Canadiens would only really trade down, and they would trade down if the player that they have their eye on is still going to be available, is still going to be on the board. But still, um, the Athletics mock draft, and this comes from Hadi Kalakash of Locked On NHL Prospects, which you should be checking out right about now because they're probably having similar conversations as to the one that I'm having right now. The Athletics mock draft has the Habs trading down from 5th to 9th overall with the Calgary Flames, and then they'll have and then so the mock draft says that Calgary is going to take Zeev Bouillon, and Tijigin is going to slip to Montreal at 9th overall. I think it's fun, to think about Iginla or Iginla's kid in a Montreal jersey is fun. It's not like he's a bad player by any respect, and that's never what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if there are players right now at this stage in your rebuild, there's going to be very few chances that you're going to have to draft in the top 10 overall if the rebuild goes the way that you want it to. You're just going to have so few chances to do that. So why in that scenario, why would you go ahead and trade down when you have a chance at top 5 potential? Like, why would you pick top 10 potential when you can get top 5 potential is what I'm saying. That's, I guess, a more concise way to make my argument. So I don't see it. But that doesn't mean that other teams will not be offering things to Kent Hughes, whether it's multiple picks, right? Like, so let's say you get a chance at one top 5 pick, or I don't know, 2 top 15s, right? I don't even I truly I should have checked the draft board before I threw out that potential trade, because I don't know if there's a team which would be able to and willing to do that. But I'm just saying, like, every choice Kent Hughes is going to make from now on is going to be a long-term choice. The only short-term moves he's going to be making are things where it's getting a guy off your roster, right? It's like the Jeff Petrie trade. He took on Jeff Petrie and then he sent him off again. He made the Canadiens better as a result, right? Like, those are the things that he's going to be engaging in, either cap retention, providing cap relief to a team, and he said he had no intentions of buying out once they have that available space on July 1st. He doesn't have really that intention, but those are the kinds of trades that he's going to be making that are short-term trades. Everything else is going to be about the future. And he has said multiple times that he does not want to sacrifice a future of a perennial contender for short-term quick wins. The Canadiens making progress is great. They should be challenging for a wild card spot next year. It's not out of the realm of possibility. That's where they should be at this stage in their development. There should be players graduating to the NHL and together challenging for a wild card spot. That is like that unfortunate no man's land is where the Canadiens are. They should be ending up next year, right? So I don't know if trading the pick is going to be it, unless Kent Hughes is confident that he's going to get 2 players that are surefire NHLers or that have such a high ceiling that you can't discount it, right? That's, I think, the biggest thing, is that after the first overall, every player has one thing that's great about them or one flaw about them, right? Or at least one flaw about them. So, and again, we're going to talk a little bit more about each player's strengths and weaknesses when we get to talking to our prospect experts. But for me, like, unless you have a guy that's sure to make your team better and to make your team, but also make your team better, why would you trade? You know, like, why to me would you give up a shot? Like, again, when's the next time they're going to be drafting 5th overall? We don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Like, something has to go drastically wrong next year for them to still be in that top, I would say top 7, top 8. I think that they're more likely to pick around 12, 11, something like that. They're going to be outside of the top 10. That's my prediction, unless, again, injuries decimate them again. So I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it. Like, what are they getting in return? Are they getting a young player in return? Are they getting so many picks that they are going to be able to rebuild their cupboard? Are they getting a player that's, maybe going to be drafted a few spots less, but it was the guy that they had their eye on for 5th overall? Like, unless those scenarios are happening, what's the point of trading that for 5th overall? I keep saying 5th overall pick. I don't think it's a good idea unless the return is truly blowing you away, but also is going to be part of the future, not like the next year. Like a guy that's like 3 years from now, 3 years from now, that's the kind of guy that they should be training for. And to be honest, like, I think their prospect pool is such that they don't necessarily need to do that. Anyway, it's all a roundabout way of saying, unless, it's something mind-blowing, I don't think people are coming and knocking and being like, okay, you give us your 5th overall, here's some crap in return. Like, Kent Hughes is not doing that. And I feel like, just use this chance. This is probably potentially the last time you're going to be picking this high. So take advantage. And if Demidov is there, you grab him. If Lindstrom is there, you grab him. That's what you do. And I just wanted to, before I end the episode, talk a little bit about what this means for the rebuild. And I do want to point out there's so much news that I haven't covered. The Engstrom signing. We haven't talked anything about the World Championships. We haven't talked anything about anything that's going on. We haven't drank the Leafs haterade even. There's so much stuff like that, and that's coming up all on the next episode. Just because I really wanted to talk about the lottery today, and in a moment we will get into what this means for the Canadiens' rebuild in the long term. But first, this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You can bet on, honestly, there's so much in the playoffs to be betting on. If you bet against the Leafs, you're probably pretty happy. That's what I do all the time. Now I kind of want to bet against the Bruins because I just don't like them. But if you want actual true odds, check out fanduel.com because it's $150 that you're going to get with any winning $5 bet that you can use on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Finally, in this last segment, I want to talk about what this kind of means overall for the Montreal Canadiens rebuild. The first thing that I want to talk about is I want to point about is that there was so much hand wringing this entire year, every time the Habs won a game. This is not good for the tank. This is not good for the tank. This is not good for the tank. There was not going to be a scenario in which the Montreal Canadiens were going to outbad the San Jose Sharks or the Chicago Blackhawks. It was just not happening. I mean, there are a lot of question marks with some of these other teams that they were in the mix with, like a team like Columbus, for example, or a team that, like the Utah whatevers, that ended up, picking behind them. But there was just, or Anaheim, right? There was just no way the Canadians were going to be that bad that they were going to get Macklin Celebrini unless they won the draft lottery and they were low enough to move up, right? So that wasn't happening. So in the absence of that, if you look at the way that the year went, we talked a lot about little things. The Canadians getting better at little things. Martin St. Louis focusing on development and bringing out new sides to players, bringing out better habits in them, improving micro things in their game, and making the players overall better. We saw them take a step forward as compared to last year. And if you didn't see that on the ice, then we weren't watching the same games, right? So I think that's really important. There was a lot of hand wringing about Cole Caulfield, but he brought out a new dimension to his game as well. Like, he sacrificed a little bit of his offense to get a little bit better at the other stuff. Whereas Juraj Slafkovsky had a breakout year. Somebody like Jaden Struble, right? So that wasn't necessarily just Martin St. Louis. That was just development and himself, like taking his own future in his hands. You saw Joshua Watt take the next step, and be like a valuable player at the NHL level. You saw a lot of things. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see Kirby Dach's steps forward, but you saw so many players. I mean, Nick Suzuki, we haven't even talked about that, right? So you saw so many players get better. You saw them get better as a team at little things, right? Little habits that they used to choose the wrong thing, and now they choose the better thing. We saw so much of that over the years. So you can't argue that the Habs in general did not get better in terms of development this year. You can't, right? There were some players that didn't, either they were troubled by injury or they didn't they weren't necessarily in a position to advance, right? It's not like they were the young, hungry players. There's a lot of that as well. Like, and I'm not really considering the veterans that aren't going to be part of this team anymore once they're contending. I'm not worried that Josh Anderson had a terrible year. I would be worried if they were contending and he had a terrible year. I would be worried if he was much younger and they were having and he had a terrible year. But all the players that you wanted to see get better got better, right? I think that's the point I'm trying to make. But at the end of the year, the Habs are still picking in the same spot as they picked last year. They did not set themselves back on that front. So overall, I think this is a huge win. Your team got better, but you still picked fifth instead of, 9th or 10th or 12th, which is if they didn't have so many injuries, if they didn't have so much trouble keeping, the puck out of the net and the power penalty kill, if their power play wasn't so abysmal, we would be having a totally different conversation because they would be picking 12th or 13th overall, not 5th overall. So they did not hurt themselves. They got better and still did not hurt their draft lottery positioning. And I think that is so key. I don't think we should discount the value of that because I was there every night when the Habs won. There were people that were in despair about it. We were all having fun. We were enjoying those wins and people were just absolutely angry about it. Why are the Habs winning? It's hurting the tank. I don't know. Like, this is where I would want to be at this stage. Like, if the Canadiens were going to have an abysmal year, but also like pick like 15th overall, that would make me sad. But they had an abysmal year. Each one of the young players that you wanted to see improve got better, and they're still picking 5th overall. Like, for me, like, this is such a win. And obviously there's a chance that they could have moved down in the draft lottery, like, but they didn't, right? So to me, like, anything, like, this is all just gravy. Like, this is all just icing on the cake because if, like, in a normal course of a rebuild, like, if the results matched their improvement, they would not be here. They would not be picking at this high pick. So again, like, I feel like there's no way. Like, the only better thing would have been if they'd won the draft lottery, and they didn't. So everything is just golden. Like, everything is gravy for me. Like, I am so excited because they have the potential, they have the chance to get a game-breaking player. Like, they do. Like, somebody that they could help build around, somebody that when they are contenders, people be like, oh, the Canadiens don't just have 3 guys to worry about, right? And that's always been the hope. That is the hope. That's always been the hope. So I am going to end this episode because there's so much more to talk about, and I have to do a Wednesday episode too. That might be late as well. But I want everyone to keep in mind that this is really the best case scenario. They didn't drop in the overall draft order, but they're in a better position when it comes to their contention in the future. And later this week, I will have some guests and, ongoing. That's our drill, after the draft lottery, we start talking to prospect experts being like, what are the Canadiens going to do at this spot? What are they going to do at this spot? And I think there's so much meat here. And I'm really, really excited to talk about this and to talk about the future. I will be back tomorrow. In the meantime, and Scott will be back next week. I'm sure he'll send me an inebriated video, let's call it, about the Canadiens picking 5th overall. And that, I'll post that as soon as I get it, if I do. In the meantime, you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Like I said, I'll have some guests this week. I did have a great episode yesterday, so you should check that out with Sam Jeffries, who wrote Legacy on Ice. He'll be here in Montreal on Thursday, May 9th, 5 to 8 p.m. at the Indigo downtown to sign his book. And in the meantime, make sure that you check out this podcast. Like I said, we are available on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts. Subscribe, tell your friends. We're on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens. If you want to reach us, please email us at lockdowncanadiens@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. And I will see you tomorrow.